I never believed in miracles, at least not the kind that come wrapped in numbers printed on a flimsy piece of paper sold at the gas station counter. I bought the ticket absent-mindedly, balancing a carton of milk and a bag of rice I wasn't sure I could afford that week. My hands trembled as I tucked it into my worn-out wallet, laughing at myself for wasting those last few dollars. That night, when I sat on my couch with the lights dimmed to save electricity, I turned on the TV just in time to see the lottery numbers being drawn. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. One by one, the numbers lined up perfectly with mine. I remember whispering, "No, this can't be real," as my heartbeat thundered in my ears. I dropped the ticket on the floor and just stared at it as if it might burn me. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as I realized I wasn't just watching another person's dream come true. This time, it was mine. My entire life had been built on struggle, secondhand clothes, eviction notices, and the weight of a family that never thought I was enough. And yet, here I was, clutching the very thing that could change it all. My mind raced to possibilities I'd never allowed myself to imagine. A warm house, food without guilt, a life without begging for help. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't just tears of joy. They were tears of disbelief, as if the universe had finally, after years of cruelty, whispered, "Here, Kaylee, you deserve this." I didn't sleep that night. I paced the floor of my tiny apartment, the ticket folded carefully in a notebook, as though it were some fragile relic. Every few minutes, I would take it out and compare the numbers again, terrified that I had misread them. But each time, the truth stared back at me. I was a millionaire. The sound of the refrigerator humming was the only thing grounding me, a reminder that despite the chaos of my heart, the world outside hadn't shifted yet. I still lived in poverty. I still had overdue bills piled on the counter. And yet, I was no longer powerless. For the first time in my life, I held the key to freedom in my hands. The temptation to call someone, anyone, was overwhelming. But who could I trust? My family had never been gentle with me. My sister Harper was the cruelest of all, turning every stumble of mine into a punchline for her amusement. I imagined telling her the news, watching her jaw drop, and yet I hesitated. If I told her now, would she suddenly pretend to care? Would she plaster on a smile and try to insert herself into my future, just to taste the riches she once mocked me for never having? The thought made my stomach twist. No, I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Instead, I made myself a promise that night. I wouldn't reveal the truth until I saw who loved me when I had nothing. I wanted to know who in my life valued me, not what I could provide. It was dangerous, perhaps even foolish, to keep a secret this big, but I had lived my entire life unseen and underestimated. This was my chance to see through the masks, to finally know where loyalty ended and greed began. The decision gave me a strange sense of control, as if I could shape the narrative of my own story, instead of always being at the mercy of others. In the days that followed, the contrast between my reality and my secret wealth felt surreal. I still clipped coupons and bought discount bread, still walked to work because gas was expensive. My coworkers laughed about their weekend plans while I smiled faintly, knowing I could buy and sell the very places they bragged about visiting. And yet, I stayed quiet. The power of silence thrilled me. Every time Harper called to sneer about my pathetic life, I would bite back my anger and simply listen, knowing something she didn't, that her words were meaningless now. But beneath that power was fear. I worried constantly about losing the ticket, about the secret slipping out in some careless moment. I hid it in different places each night, under my mattress, inside a cereal box, taped to the back of a drawer. My paranoia grew, but so did my determination. The secrecy wasn't just about protecting the money, it was about protecting myself. For once, I had something no one could take from me unless I allowed it. It was my shield, my revenge, and my salvation all in one. And yet, with all the joy and fear twisting inside me, there was also loneliness. Who could I share this with? Who could celebrate this impossible miracle at my side? No one. Not my parents, who always said I'd never make anything of myself. Not Harper, who mocked me endlessly. Not even my so-called friends, who only called when they needed favors. So I sat in silence, hugging my secret, feeling both invincible and invisible all at once. That night, as I finally collapsed onto the couch, one thought burned brighter than all the others. If they couldn't love me when I had nothing, they would never deserve me now that I had everything. With that vow carved into my heart, I closed my eyes and drifted into an uneasy sleep, clutching the future in my hands. Tomorrow, the world would look the same, but I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after I won the lottery, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at a face that suddenly looked different. It wasn't that my features had changed, but there was something in my eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. Still, as I touched the scar near my temple, a reminder from years ago when Harper had shoved me during a fight, I remembered who I had always been to my family. The weak one, the unwanted one, the disappointment. My reflection whispered the same insecurities I'd carried my whole life, even though my bank account now said otherwise. Harper had always been the golden child, blonde hair that caught the light like a halo, a smile sharp enough to slice through anyone who doubted her. Teachers adored her, friends gravitated toward her, and our parents never hesitated to remind me how I should be more like Harper. She was confident where I was cautious, loud where I was quiet, and cruel where I was tender. From the time we were children, she learned that tearing me down elevated her higher, and my silence only fueled her power. I became her favorite target, her proof that she was superior. One memory in particular still haunted me. I was 12, clutching a report card filled with B's and one lonely A in English. I had been proud, certain my parents would smile, maybe even hug me. Instead, Harper waltzed in with her perfect string of A's and rolled her eyes. B's are for people who give up before they even start, she sneered, grabbing my paper and waving it around until my father laughed. My cheeks had burned with shame, and I remember wishing I could disappear. That night, as I cried myself to sleep, Harper's laughter still echoed in my head. Over the years, that cycle never broke. Harper found new ways to belittle me, and my parents rarely defended me. When I couldn't afford college, she mocked me for settling into dead-end jobs. When I rented a rundown apartment, she joked that even stray cats lived better than me. Every insult burrowed deeper into my skin, leaving scars invisible to the world, but heavy enough to shape my very existence. I grew cautious, timid, always second-guessing myself, because somewhere inside, I had accepted their narrative that I was less, and yet, despite it all, I kept reaching out to them. Some twisted part of me still craved their approval, their affection. I told myself that family was family, that maybe if I worked harder or proved myself in some way, Harper would finally look at me with respect instead of ridicule. But no matter how many times I tried, the result was always the same. I ended up hurt, humiliated, and alone. It was like running into the same wall over and over again, hoping one day it might soften. Now, standing in my shabby apartment with a lottery ticket worth millions, I felt the irony pressing against my chest. For years, I had been begging for scraps of kindness from people who never valued me, and now, I was richer than all of them combined. The shift in power should have thrilled me, but instead, it terrified me. What would they do if they knew? Would Harper cling to me like a parasite, pretending the past never happened? Would my parents suddenly become proud, rewriting history to fit their new version of me? I shuddered at the thought. It was then that I decided to test them, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. I needed to know the truth before I let them into my new life. So I resolved to keep living as though I were still broke, still struggling. If they cared, they would show it. If they didn't, I would finally stop torturing myself with false hope. My secret wealth wasn't just money. It was a magnifying glass that would reveal everything I needed to see. As the sun set that evening, I sat at my small kitchen table, bills scattered like landmines across the surface. I could have paid them off right then, freed myself from the weight of overdue notices and threats. But instead, I stared at them, my jaw tight. This was more than a test of my family. It was a test of me. Would I finally have the strength to stop chasing love where there was none? My hands trembled as I whispered to myself, if they can't love you now, Kaylee, they'll never deserve you later. And with that, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The next morning, I woke up in my cramped apartment, the sound of a dripping faucet echoing through the silence. The lottery ticket was still tucked into the back of my drawer, safe and untouched, as if it were a secret too powerful to be held in my hands for long. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faded wallpaper, and the thought hit me like a cold wave. I was rich, but no one could ever know, at least not yet. Because the truth was, my family didn't deserve to share this moment with me. They had never been there when I needed them most. And Harper, she had been the sharpest thorn in my side since childhood, the voice that reminded me I would never be enough. Harper wasn't just my sister. She was my shadow and my rival, though she never once considered me competition. To her, I was the perfect punching bag, someone to make herself shine brighter by dimming me. From the outside, she had it all: charm, beauty, confidence that filled any room she entered. She walked through life like the world owed her attention, and people gladly gave it. I, on the other hand, was the background character, the one people forgot about until Harper needed a new insult, or my parents needed someone to compare her to. I still remember her smirk the day she told me, "You'll never be more than average, Kaylee. People like you don't win in life." One memory burned particularly deep. I was 14, and Harper was 16, already wearing her popularity like a crown. It was family dinner night, and I'd spent hours baking a cake from scratch, something I hoped would earn me a rare word of praise. But the moment I placed it on the table, Harper wrinkled her nose and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Did you spit in it, Kaylee? No one should eat that." My parents laughed, and in that instant, my pride crumbled. The cake went untouched, my tears hidden behind a smile, and Harper won again. That was her specialty, making sure my victories turned into ashes. Even in adulthood, the pattern never changed. When I graduated from community college, Harper showed up to the ceremony late, muttering that it wasn't a real degree. When I got my first job at a small bookstore, she smirked and said, "So you'll spend your life dusting shelves?" Impressive. Every achievement I clawed my way toward, she cut down with a single sentence. And my parents? They never stopped her. Sometimes I wondered if they agreed with her. That was the poison I grew up with, believing that love was conditional, and I had never met the requirements. And yet, some part of me still craved her approval. I wanted her to see me, just once, without that sneer, without the sarcasm dripping from her voice. I wanted my parents to say they were proud. I wanted to believe that maybe, beneath the cruelty, there was love. But the older I got, the clearer it became. What I was searching for didn't exist. I was chasing ghosts, and every time I reached out, my hands closed on nothing. That longing was a weakness Harper had always exploited. Now, with millions in my name, I realized I had the power to turn the tables. But I didn't want revenge. Not yet. What I wanted was clarity. I wanted to strip away the masks and see who my family really was when they thought I had nothing. Would Harper finally help me if I asked? Would my parents offer me kindness without strings attached? Or would they do what they always did? Laugh, dismiss, and walk away? The lottery wasn't just money. It was a test of truth. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, bills scattered in messy piles, like tiny reminders of every struggle I had endured alone. I could pay them all instantly now, but I didn't. I forced myself to stare at the overdue notices, to feel the weight of what had defined me for so long. This was the person my family thought I still was. Broke, dependent, easy to mock. If I reached out now, I would see their raw, unfiltered selves. No excuses, no fake smiles. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. I whispered to myself, if they can't love me when I'm at my lowest, they don't deserve to stand beside me when I rise. My voice trembled, but the conviction felt real. I wasn't just testing them, I was testing myself. Could I finally let go of the need for their approval, the endless cycle of humiliation? The answer was close. I could feel it. And so, I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over Harper's number. My heart pounded as I thought, if I ask her for something small, something human, would she finally show me a kindness I'd been denied all my life? The phone felt heavier in my hand than it should have, as though every year of humiliation was pressing down on me through that cold screen. Harper's number glared back at me, the same digits I had dialed 1,000 times, but each call had ended the same way: dismissal, mockery, or worse, silence. I swallowed hard and pressed call, my heart racing like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. When her voice finally came through, sharp and honey-coated as always, I froze. "Kaylee, this is a surprise," she said, her tone dripping with amusement. I could almost picture her smirk as if she already knew I was about to beg. "Hi, Harper," I managed, trying to sound calm, but my voice cracked. The silence on her end felt intentional, a reminder that she always held the upper hand. I clenched my fist, forcing the words out. I was wondering if you could help me. Things have been tight, and I'm short on groceries this week. Just a little help would mean a lot." The words tasted bitter, but I let them hang in the air, waiting. My chest tightened. Would she hear her little sister asking? Or just another chance to remind me of my place? Her laugh came sharp and sudden, like glass shattering in my ear. Groceries? Are you serious, Kaylee? She mocked. You're 30 years old. Maybe instead of begging, you should get a real job. Oh, wait. Didn't you try that bookstore thing? How's that going? Dusty shelves and minimum wage, right? My stomach twisted, but I stayed quiet, letting her fill the silence with her cruelty. Each word was a dagger, but I reminded myself, this was the point. This was the truth I needed to see. I forced a shaky laugh, trying to mask the sting. So, that's a no? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Harper didn't even hesitate. Obviously. I'm not here to carry you. Maybe if you stopped playing the victim, you wouldn't be in this mess. She said it so casually, as though I wasn't her sister, as though I hadn't grown up under the same roof. I bit the inside of my cheek, hard enough to taste blood, and whispered, "Okay, I understand." But inside, I was breaking. When I hung up, the silence of my apartment pressed down on me, heavier than ever. My hand shook as I set the phone on the table. I had expected this, but hearing it, feeling it, was like reliving every childhood wound all over again. She hadn't changed. She hadn't grown. And in that moment, I realized something more devastating. She didn't just ignore me. She relished my pain. My suffering was entertainment for her, and maybe it always had been. I sat there for a long time, staring at the peeling paint on the wall, my mind swirling with memories. Harper laughing as she pushed me into the mud when we were kids. Harper mocking my thrift store dress at prom. Harper whispering to her friends in college that I was pathetic for living at home. All those moments stitched together like scars. And now, this phone call was just another one to add to the collection. Only this time I wasn't powerless. This time, I had something she could never take from me. My tears dried quicker than I expected. In their place, a new strength began to rise. I whispered into the empty room. She doesn't know. She'll never know what's coming. My voice trembled, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her help. I had millions hidden away, a secret crown that no insult could tarnish. And the best part? She would never see it coming. That night, I slipped the winning ticket from my drawer and stared at the numbers glowing under the lamplight. This little piece of paper had become more than money. It was justice. It was liberation. Harper thought I was still the weak sister, begging for scraps. But in reality, I was standing at the edge of a brand new life. I folded the ticket back into its hiding place and lay down in bed, whispering to myself, the test has only just begun. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. If Harper had failed me so spectacularly, what about the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? My parents. For years, I had excused their distance, convincing myself they were simply tired, busy, or too old to notice the differences between me and Harper. But deep down, I knew the truth. They had always adored her brilliance, her polished charm, her ability to impress the world, while I faded into the background like an afterthought. Still, I hoped, maybe foolishly, that when tested, their hearts would remember me. I told myself they had to. I dialed my mother's number first, pacing around my cramped kitchen as the phone rang. When she answered, her voice was warm but distracted, like I had interrupted her mid-task. "Kaylee, hello. Everything okay?" she asked. I hesitated, wondering how much vulnerability I dared to show. "Mom, I'm really struggling this week," I began, my voice breaking just enough to sound believable. "I don't even know how I'm going to cover groceries or rent. Could you maybe lend me just a little, just until I figure things out?" The silence that followed stretched longer than I expected, each second another crack in my heart. "Oh, Kaylee," she finally sighed. "We've helped you so much already, haven't we? You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. We're not in a position to keep bailing you out." Her tone wasn't harsh, but it was dismissive, weary, like my plea was nothing more than another inconvenience. I bit my lip, trying not to sound crushed. "It wouldn't be for long," I whispered, but she was already shifting the conversation. "I'll let your father know you called. Maybe he'll have advice. But honestly, sweetheart, you need to toughen up. Life isn't easy for anyone." Advice. That was all I was worth. When the line disconnected, I felt the weight of years crashing down on me. The birthday parties where Harper got the bigger gifts, the dinners where my stories were brushed aside, the countless moments when my achievements, small as they were, went unnoticed. My parents had loved me in their way, but never fiercely, never protectively, never with the unshakable loyalty I craved. I sat in the silence of my apartment, realizing with a sting that even now, with one simple request, they had chosen distance over compassion. And the worst part? I had expected it. That evening, I received a call from my father. His voice was steady, authoritative, the same way it had always been when delivering lessons disguised as conversations. "Your mother told me you reached out," he began. "Kaylee, you're grown. We can't be rescuing you forever. You need to take responsibility for yourself. Harper doesn't seem to have these problems, does she? Why do you think that is?" His words weren't cruel, but they were a knife twisted with calm precision. He wasn't offering help. He was pointing out the comparison I had lived under all my life. Harper, the shining star. Me, the disappointment. I wanted to scream, to tell him I didn't need rescuing, that I had more wealth in my pocket than Harper could dream of, that his words meant nothing to me now. But instead, I listened in silence, letting his lecture wash over me. When he finally ended with, "We love you, but it's time you grew up," I whispered, "I understand, Dad," and hung up. My chest ached, but behind the ache was a quiet fire. They thought I was weak, incapable, a permanent shadow to my sister. They had no idea who I had become. That night, I stared at my reflection in the cracked mirror of my bathroom. My face was pale, my eyes rimmed with red, but there was something else there too. A glimmer, a defiance. I touched the glass, whispering, "You are not invisible anymore." For so long, I had begged for scraps of love and recognition, believing that if I just tried harder, they would see me. But now I saw the truth. I had been asking the wrong people. Their love came with conditions, comparisons, and judgments. I didn't need it anymore. As I crawled into bed, the lottery ticket tucked safely under my pillow, I felt something shift inside me. The test had revealed what I already feared, but also what I needed to know. Harper mocked me. My parents dismissed me. And though their rejection hurt like 1,000 cuts, it also freed me. I didn't owe them explanations or endless loyalty anymore. For the first time in my life, I realized I could build a world where their voices no longer defined me. And that world, glittering and vast, was waiting just beyond the horizon. The night after my parents brushed me off, I stood in my tiny kitchen staring at the almost bare shelves. A half-eaten jar of peanut butter, a few stale crackers, and one bruised apple mocked me. I thought about how Harper had once mocked me in the supermarket years ago when I bought discount brand cereal, telling me I had no taste and that I'd never have nice things. That memory clawed back at me as I realized she might have been right, at least in her eyes. My stomach growled, but my pride burned hotter. Should I really beg her again for help? Or should I let the silence of my family be the final proof I needed? I decided to send Harper one last message. Not begging, but testing. I wrote, "Harper, things are rough this week. Could you spot me a few dollars for groceries? I'll pay you back Friday." My hands hovered over the screen before hitting send, the glow of the phone illuminating the tears threatening to fall. Minutes stretched into hours until finally her reply buzzed through. "Get a job, Kaylee. Nobody owes you anything." My throat tightened as I read the words again and again. She hadn't even tried to mask her disdain. It was cruel, almost gleeful, and yet I smiled through my tears. I had my answer. That night, lying in bed, I replayed her laugh in my head, the sharp, dismissive tone that cut deeper than any blade. It wasn't just about groceries. It was about what I meant to her. Nothing. She didn't see me as a sister, but as dead weight, someone unworthy of compassion. I thought about the nights I stayed up late helping her study when we were teenagers, the mornings I covered for her when she snuck out, the birthday gifts I saved up for her even when I had nothing. All of it meant nothing to her now. My heart felt heavy, but beneath the weight, something new was stirring, something fierce, almost defiant. The truth was, Harper wasn't wrong about one thing. Nobody owed me anything, but she hadn't realized that I owed her nothing in return. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her help. I didn't need to keep playing the role of the forgotten, mocked sister. What she didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that I was holding a winning ticket in my drawer. I had been holding onto it for days, almost daring fate to test me. And now, after every rejection, every cruel word, I realized exactly why I had kept it secret. It wasn't about money. It was about truth. The ticket had been sitting there, folded in half, tucked beneath old receipts. Every time I looked at it, I thought of my late nights at the gas station where I bought it, the exhaustion in my bones, the hopelessness that clung to me like a shadow. Buying that ticket was a whim, a surrender to chance, but when the numbers flashed across the screen and matched mine, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in stunned silence. I knew immediately I couldn't tell them. Not yet. Not until I saw who would be there for me, without knowing what I could give them in return. Now I had my answer. I thought back to my mother's silence, my father's excuses, and Harper's laugh. The people I had built my life around had shown me their true faces. If I had revealed my win too soon, they would have showered me with false kindness, begging to share in my fortune. But in their unfiltered rejection, they gave me the gift I didn't know I needed: clarity. I had spent so long searching for proof of their love, only to realize that love had to be unconditional, and theirs never was. That realization hurt more than hunger, but it also freed me. That night, I closed my empty cupboard and poured myself a glass of tap water. As the cold liquid slid down my throat, I whispered to myself, never again. Never again would I beg. Never again would I doubt my worth based on their treatment, and never again would I let their voices define me. I wasn't just a forgotten daughter or a ridiculed sister. I was someone who held power, quiet and hidden, waiting for the right moment to change everything. They thought I was nothing, but soon they would see. Still, I wasn't sure what my next move should be. Should I confront them now, reveal the truth in one explosive declaration, or should I let them linger in their certainty of my failure while I carefully built a life far beyond their reach? My instincts told me to wait, to plan, to savor the quiet power of knowing something they didn't. The hunger in my stomach had been replaced with a hunger in my heart, the hunger for justice, for vindication, for freedom from the shackles of their disdain. So I folded the ticket back into its hiding place, pulled the blanket over my body, and let sleep finally take me. But even as I drifted into dreams, I could hear Harper's laugh echoing in the distance, fading into something far less sharp. It was no longer a wound. It was a reminder of why I had to stay silent, a reminder of the storm that was building within me, and a promise to myself that one day the truth would thunder down on them, and they would never laugh at me again. The morning after Harper's cruel text, I walked through town with a hollow expression, clutching my near-empty wallet like it was some fragile piece of my dignity. The streets buzzed with people rushing to work, children tugging at their mothers' hands, vendors shouting about fresh produce I couldn't afford. The scent of roasted coffee beans wafted through the air, and I felt the ache of longing in my chest. It wasn't just the coffee I craved, but the normalcy, the ability to walk into a cafe without calculating the cost of one cup against tomorrow's dinner. I walked past the glass windows, catching glimpses of couples laughing and families sharing pastries, and for a fleeting moment, I envied them, not for their wealth, but for their togetherness, something money couldn't truly buy. But then I remembered, love wasn't given to me freely. My own family had made that clear. Back at my apartment, the walls seemed to echo with my silence. I turned on the small radio I kept on the counter, and ironically, the announcer was talking about the latest lottery winners who had stepped forward publicly. Their stories were full of shock and joy, tales of family members celebrating, of friends clinking glasses, of life instantly transformed. I turned the volume down until the voices blurred, my own story pulsing in the back of my mind. Nobody celebrated with me when I won. Nobody even knew. And that secrecy had become both a shield and a weapon. Some days I longed to scream it out, to slam the ticket onto Harper's perfect dining table and watch her choke on her wine. But another part of me whispered that patience would taste sweeter, that silence was more powerful than any outburst. I pulled the ticket from its hiding place again, running my fingers over the faint creases. It didn't look like much, just a flimsy piece of paper with printed numbers, but to me it was the key to a life none of them could imagine. It was strange, really, how something so small could hold such power. I thought about how Harper had laughed, about how my parents had dismissed me, and I realized this paper wasn't just wealth, it was truth. It was proof that the universe hadn't forgotten me, even when my family had. And though they couldn't see it, I carried it inside me like a secret flame. The longer I kept it to myself, the brighter it burned, illuminating every dark corner of rejection they'd left behind. Still, I wondered what revealing it would do to me. Would it make me just like them, shallow and vindictive, flashing my success like a weapon? Or would it free me, finally proving that their cruelty had no power over me? I wasn't sure. That inner war raged in me every hour, a tug of war between vengeance and grace. Sometimes I imagined Harper's shocked face, her mouth opening but no words coming out as I told her about the mansion I was moving into. Other times, I imagined simply disappearing, leaving them behind forever, and letting them hear the truth from strangers. Both fantasies satisfied something deep inside me, but neither felt complete. Because the truth was, this wasn't only about money. It was about my heart, my self-worth, my need to finally be seen. That evening, Harper's social media post popped up on my phone. She was grinning in a sparkling dress at some cocktail event, holding a champagne glass, the caption reading, "Some people are born to shine, others, not so much. Guess which one I am." The comments flooded in, praising her beauty and her lifestyle, feeding her ego. I stared at the photo for a long time, and my stomach twisted, not with jealousy, but with the memory of her words echoing back to me. "Get a job, loser." She had no idea what I was holding. No idea that the same sister she mocked could buy and sell the life she flaunted. My hands trembled, not with weakness, but with the restraint of holding myself back from telling her everything in one furious outpour. I tossed my phone onto the bed and opened the window, letting the night air brush against my skin. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, grounding myself in the silence. It was in these quiet moments that I understood the weight of my secret more clearly than ever. It wasn't just about exposing them. It was about rebuilding me. If I revealed it now, it would be for revenge. But if I waited, if I planned, then maybe, just maybe, it could be for freedom. And freedom meant more than proving Harper wrong. It meant proving myself right, that I was more than their discarded sister, more than their shadow. The loneliness was still sharp, though. I had no one to confide in, no one I trusted enough to share the truth with. I wondered if wealth could buy me loyalty, or if it would only attract leeches hungrier than the family who had already betrayed me. That fear gripped me tightly. Money could change my life, but it couldn't heal the wounds carved by rejection. Only I could do that. And so I sat there, staring out into the quiet street, telling myself that healing had to come before revelation. That was the hardest part, waiting, enduring, knowing the truth while still playing the role of the struggling, invisible sister. But as I crawled into bed, pulling the blanket around me, something settled deep within me. It was a decision, not fully formed, but strong enough to ease my restless mind. I would not rush. I would not let anger dictate my next steps. The time would come when Harper and the rest of them would see what I had become, but it would be on my terms, not theirs. Until then, the ticket would remain hidden, my secret weapon, my silent victory. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a strange kind of peace, knowing that in my silence, I was already winning. The following week, I decided it was time to act, even if only in small ways. I still woke up in my tiny apartment, with its peeling paint and squeaky pipes. But something in me shifted. I no longer looked at those cracks in the wall as signs of defeat. I saw them as reminders of where I had been, soon to be left behind. That morning, instead of going through the motions of pretending to job hunt, I went to a bank, quietly, discreetly, and began the process of securing the winnings. The man behind the desk looked at me as though I had stepped into another world, his polite smile faltering when the numbers appeared on his screen. For a moment I thought he might ask if it was a mistake, but then he nodded slowly, his tone shifting to respect. In his eyes, I was no longer a struggling woman. I was someone powerful. Walking out of the bank that day felt like crossing an invisible line. The city looked the same. The cracked sidewalks, the busy traffic, the same neon signs flickering in windows. But I felt different. Every person who brushed past me seemed unaware of the truth, and that anonymity gave me a rush of power I hadn't felt in years. For so long, I had been invisible, treated as a nuisance, dismissed as less. Now, I carried a secret so enormous that it could rewrite every chapter of my story. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. I walked with my head a little higher, not because anyone could see my wealth, but because for the first time, I truly believed I was no longer bound to the labels my family had stuck on me. I didn't tell anyone, not Harper, not my parents, not even the one or two acquaintances I barely kept in touch with. The secret was mine alone, and guarding it gave me strength. That evening I cooked myself a simple meal, rice, eggs, and vegetables, and sat by the window as though it were a celebration. It wasn't the food that mattered, but the awareness that tomorrow I could eat anywhere I wanted, buy anything I craved. Yet I chose simplicity, because I wanted to savor the shift in me, not drown it in extravagance. It was a small rebellion against the idea that wealth defined worth. For the first time, I was defining myself. Still, the temptation to confront Harper lingered like a shadow at the back of my mind. Every time my phone buzzed with one of her flaunting social media posts, I felt the itch to respond, to shatter her illusion of superiority. But each time, I reminded myself of the vow I had made. Not yet. She wasn't ready, and maybe I wasn't either. The power lay in waiting, in choosing the perfect moment when the truth would cut the deepest. Not out of cruelty, but because sometimes lessons had to be sharp to be remembered. I wanted her to feel what she had made me feel, invisible, powerless. But I also wanted to rise above the urge to become her mirror. A few days later, I visited a neighborhood far from where my family lived, far from where anyone knew me. There, I met with a real estate agent to tour properties. Walking into the first house, a modest but beautiful brick home with polished wooden floors and sunlight pouring through wide windows, I felt my throat tighten. The agent was polite, almost overly so, his words careful, as though he sensed something different about me. I didn't make a decision that day, but I knew I would. Standing in those empty rooms, I saw a future free from the weight of every insult Harper had thrown at me. A place where silence wasn't lonely, but peaceful. A place that was mine. Back at my apartment, I began packing small things. Not enough for anyone to notice yet, but enough to feel real. A stack of books, a few picture frames, clothes I no longer wore. As I folded and sorted, I thought about the irony. If Harper knew, she would mock me for clinging to small routines instead of flaunting everything at once. But that wasn't me. I didn't want to scream my success into the world. I wanted to build a foundation so solid that no one could shake it again. Every folded shirt, every carefully wrapped trinket was a piece of my transformation, proof that I was leaving the old Kaylee behind. Despite my progress, the loneliness sometimes grew unbearable. I thought about calling someone, anyone, to share the truth with. But then I would picture Harper's sneer, my mother's dismissive sigh, my father's silence. They had trained me to keep my victories quiet, to never expect applause, and maybe that was a blessing in disguise. My wealth didn't need validation from them. I told myself that over and over again, and though it stung, it also freed me. If I could stand alone in this truth, then no betrayal could break me again. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, studying myself in a way I hadn't in years. The reflection staring back wasn't glamorous, but it was alive, determined. I saw strength in the lines of my face, resilience in my eyes, fire in my posture. For once, I wasn't measuring myself against Harper or anyone else. I was measuring myself against who I had been, and the difference was striking. The woman in the mirror was no longer begging for crumbs of affection or scraps of approval. She was holding an empire in silence, waiting for the moment to step into the light. And when she did, the world would never see her the same way again. The day I signed the papers felt like stepping into another universe. My hand trembled as I wrote my name, but it wasn't fear. It was power, raw and uncontainable. The real estate agent slid the documents across the desk, congratulating me with a professional smile, but I could see curiosity in his eyes. He didn't ask how I could afford it, though I wondered if he wanted to. To him, I was just another client. To me, I was rewriting my life in ink. When the keys landed in my palm, cool and metallic, I gripped them so tightly my fingers turned white. They weren't just keys. They were the proof that I was no longer trapped in the life Harper had mocked me for. I waited until evening to drive out to the house, not wanting anyone to follow or notice. The road wound further away from the city, leaving behind the gray buildings and crowded sidewalks, opening into wide stretches of quiet neighborhoods, with manicured lawns and homes that seemed plucked from another reality. Pulling up to the driveway of my new house, I felt my chest constrict, as though I didn't belong here, and yet I did. The house stood tall, its white exterior glowing under the streetlights, windows reflecting back the sky. It wasn't just a structure, it was a promise, a monument to every tear I had swallowed in silence. Inside, the rooms were still empty, but they didn't feel lonely. The polished wooden floors creaked softly under my steps. The air carried a faint scent of fresh paint and possibility. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, imagining where my life would unfold. A kitchen large enough for gatherings I'd never hosted. A living room where silence would finally feel safe, not suffocating. A bedroom where I could sleep without the weight of doubt pressing against my chest. I stood in front of a massive window overlooking the garden, moonlight bathing the grass, and felt a lump rise in my throat. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I moved slowly, one box at a time, savoring every trip like it was a sacred ritual. My old apartment, once a cage, was now a ghost I was eager to leave behind. Each item I carried into the new house felt transformed. Books became treasures. Clothes became symbols of survival. Even my worn-out shoes felt like relics of a past I had conquered. With every box set down, I whispered to myself, "This is mine. This is real." I wanted to etch those words into my bones, so I would never again doubt my own worth. Yet even in my joy, I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to Harper. I pictured her laughing at me the last time we spoke, telling me to get a job, loser, her eyes glittering with mockery. I wondered what she would say if she saw me now, standing in a house that could swallow her apartment whole. The thought made me smile, but it also hurt. How many years had I wasted chasing her approval, begging for scraps of love? This house was my answer, a quiet, resounding declaration. I didn't need her anymore. And yet, some part of me wished she could see it, just to know she had been wrong all along. I set up a mattress in the bedroom for my first night. Nothing fancy, just something to sleep on until I furnished the place. Lying there, staring at the high ceiling above me, I listened to the silence. At first, it unnerved me, the absence of sirens or neighbors arguing through thin walls, but then it soothed me. It was the silence of peace, not neglect. My body relaxed into it, my heartbeat slowing until I realized I felt safe. That night, I dreamed not of Harper or my parents or the past, but of light-filled mornings and laughter echoing through hallways that had never known my voice before. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, painting golden stripes across the floor. I brewed coffee in the bare kitchen, the smell filling the air, and stood barefoot in the middle of my new living room. I didn't need fancy furniture or decorations yet. The house itself was enough. I thought about all the times Harper had mocked me for being directionless, for having nothing to show for my life. I wanted to laugh. If only she knew. She was still trapped in her cage of vanity and cruelty, while I stood free, holding more than she could ever imagine. Still, I chose silence. I didn't post pictures, didn't brag, didn't invite anyone over. This house wasn't for their approval. It was for me. For the girl who had been humiliated at every turn, told she was worthless, dismissed as invisible. Every brick, every window, every corner of this home was a declaration that I had survived. And not only survived, I had triumphed. Harper would never understand that, not until the day came when I decided to reveal the truth. But until then, the mansion of my secret victory stood quietly, like a crown no one else could see, waiting for the moment it would finally shine in the light. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. Harper's name flashed across my screen, and for a moment I considered letting it ring into silence. My thumb hovered, caught between years of hurt and the strange curiosity of what she might want. Finally I answered, and her voice rushed into my ear, not dripping with mockery as it usually did, but shaky, brittle, and unsteady. "Kaylee," she said, "I need your help." My heart clenched, not out of sympathy, but from the irony so sharp it almost cut me. This was the same sister who had laughed in my face when I asked for help, and now it seemed the world had turned the tables. I sat down on the edge of my new, empty sofa, listening as she poured out a story I wasn't sure I believed. Her job had cut hours. She was behind on rent, and her boyfriend had left, taking half her savings with him. She kept talking, her voice faltering, as though saying the words out loud made them real. Part of me felt a flicker of the old instinct, to step in, to ease her burden, but it was quickly smothered by the memory of her sneer when I had asked for grocery money. "Loser," she had called me then. Now she was the one sounding desperate. Life had a cruel way of balancing itself. When she asked if she could come over, I hesitated. She thought I still lived in that cramped apartment with the peeling paint and thin walls. The thought of her stepping into my mansion, her eyes widening, her pride collapsing, it was tempting. But I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to give her that satisfaction of seeing where I stood. "I'm not home," I lied smoothly, keeping my voice calm. "What do you need?" I could almost feel her disappointment through the phone, but she pressed on, asking if I could lend her some money. My chest tightened, not because I didn't have it, but because I finally realized the truth. She only reached for me when she was drowning. I told her I'd think about it, and hung up before she could protest. Sitting there in the silence of my brand new living room, I felt a storm of emotion swirling inside me. A part of me still longed for reconciliation, for the chance to feel like we were truly sisters. But another part, the stronger part, knew that she had built a wall between us, brick by brick, with every cruel word, every dismissal, every time she made me feel small. Now she wanted me to tear that wall down because it suddenly blocked her way. I pressed my hand against the smooth wooden table in front of me and whispered, "Not yet." Over the next few days, she kept calling. Sometimes she left voicemails, her voice growing more frantic each time. She didn't sound like the sister I had known, the one with the polished smile, the perfect clothes, the endless confidence. She sounded stripped raw, reduced, almost human in her vulnerability. Each time my phone buzzed, I felt the weight of her desperation pulling at me, testing my resolve. But I stayed silent, carrying boxes into my mansion, decorating my new life piece by piece, while hers seemed to unravel at the seams. The contrast was almost too much to bear. I began to see her differently, not as the giant who had towered over my life, mocking me, but as a woman who had built her world on fragile illusions. Without money, without admiration, without someone to belittle, she was exposed. And in that exposure, she finally resembled me. Not the me she used to taunt, but the me she had never truly known. It made me wonder if this was what she had feared all along, that beneath her armor of superiority, she was no stronger than I was. One evening, as I stood in the vast kitchen of my new home, stirring a pot of pasta, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Her voice cracked through the speaker. "Kaylee, please. I don't know what to do. You're my sister. Please call me back." For a moment, my hand froze, the spoon suspended in midair. That word, sister, hit me harder than all the pleas for money. She had never said it like that before, not with sincerity, not with need. For a second, I saw the girl we used to be, before the cruelty, before the rivalry, before she chose pride over love. I deleted the voicemail, set my phone face down, and carried my plate of pasta to the long dining table that could seat 10 people. I sat alone at the head, the silence of the mansion wrapping around me. Part of me wanted to cry, part of me wanted to laugh, and part of me wanted to scream at the universe for being so bitterly ironic. Harper, the sister who had laughed at me when I was at my lowest, was now reaching for me in her darkest hour. And me? I was sitting in a house she would never imagine, holding a secret so powerful it burned inside me like fire. The day Harper finally saw me again was nothing like I'd imagined. She showed up at my old apartment, pounding on the door, her voice echoing down the hallway like a storm. I wasn't there, of course. The landlord had already rented it out, and she stood in the hallway demanding answers from strangers. That's when she called me again, her voice shrill with frustration. "Where are you, Kaylee? Why won't you talk to me? Don't you care what I'm going through?" I listened quietly before answering, my words deliberate. "Come find me, Harper. I'll text you the address." My hand shook as I sent her the pin, knowing this was the moment I'd been waiting for. When she arrived, her car pulled slowly into the gated driveway, her eyes wide with confusion as the iron gates swung open. She stepped out, heels clicking against the stone path, craning her neck to take in the massive house that loomed before her. Her expression was priceless, bewilderment tangled with disbelief, as though she had stumbled onto a movie set. "Whose house is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp, suspicious. I opened the front door and stood framed in the golden glow of the chandelier behind me. "Mine," I said simply. The word echoed, heavy and undeniable, and I watched the color drain from her face. She laughed then, a hollow, forced sound, as if clinging to some shred of denial. "Yours? Don't be ridiculous, Kaylee. You can't even pay your bills." Her words tried to cut like they always had, but they carried no weight anymore. I stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in, and after a long pause, she crossed the threshold. The marble floor clicked beneath her shoes as she looked around, her eyes darting from the grand staircase to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Every corner of the house was proof of the life she had sworn I'd never have, and then I told her. Calmly, without theatrics, I laid out the truth. I had won the lottery, months ago, and chosen to keep it secret. Her jaw dropped, her lips trembling as she processed the words. The silence that followed was the loudest I had ever heard. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her eyes narrowing, searching my face for weakness, for some sign that this was a lie. But it wasn't. She saw it in my steady gaze, in the confidence that had replaced the timid sister she used to mock. You had money this whole time?" she stammered. "And you let me—" She stopped, choking on the words. I nodded slowly. "Yes, Harper. I let you. I wanted to see who you really were when I had nothing. And you showed me." Her face twisted with anger, shame, and something else. Fear. She tried to recover, her voice climbing in pitch as she spun excuses. "I didn't mean what I said. I was joking, Kaylee. You know me, I always tease. You can't hold that against me. We're sisters." The word hung in the air, desperate and fragile. I remembered her voicemail, that one broken plea where she called me sister with sincerity, and for a fleeting moment my heart softened. But then I remembered every time she laughed at my struggles, every wound she left that I had carried silently for years. "You didn't tease," I said quietly. "You belittled, you humiliated, and you loved me only when you needed something." Her mask cracked then. She dropped her gaze, her hands tightening around the strap of her purse until her knuckles turned white. "So what now?" she whispered, her voice hollow. "You have everything, and I have nothing. Is that what you wanted? To see me crawl?" The question cut deep, because the truth was complicated. I hadn't wanted her to suffer, not really. I had wanted her to see me, not as the weak, useless sister she had always painted me, but as someone worthy, someone strong. Yet here she was, on the edge of collapse, and I couldn't tell if it was justice or cruelty that had brought us to this moment. I looked at her for a long time before answering. "What I wanted, Harper, was to know the truth, and now I do. You laughed when I needed you most. You made me feel like nothing. But look around. Look at me now. I don't need you to approve of me anymore. I don't need you at all." The words spilled out of me, firm and final, and I felt lighter than I ever had before. For once, I wasn't the sister begging for scraps of affection. I was the one standing tall, watching the woman who had always overshadowed me shrink before my eyes. She left that night without another word, her footsteps echoing across the marble as the front door slammed behind her. I stood in the silence of my mansion, my reflection staring back at me from the glass walls. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt instead was a mix of sorrow and release, like closing a book I had carried for far too long. Harper had been my greatest wound, but also my sharpest lesson. As I climbed the staircase to my bedroom, I whispered to myself, this was never about revenge. It was about freedom, and for the first time, I believed it.